A lot of angry things are said in the heat of a divorce, but when Ed Burns said death before divorce about his wife, was he recalling his vows or making a threat? It's a question that loomed large when his ex-wife was found dead in her bed on Mother's Day.
In a small town where everyone knows everyone else and their business and nobody locks their doors, everyone was shell-shocked. A killer was in their midst. But the scariest idea of all, it could be one of the people they all knew. Here's John Quinones.
Oh, she was fun. She was happy.
Always made you feel good, always had a hug for you, always had a laugh, a smile.
I think Stacey made everybody feel like her best friend.
She was a one in a million, how I'd describe her.
Stacey Burns was a popular figure in the lakeside community of Wolfboro, New Hampshire.
Everybody went to her house. The door was always open to everyone, old and young.
I just loved being over there in that atmosphere.
Stacey's large colonial house sits on the main street of Wolfboro, a tight-knit community of 6,000 people that balloons to 25,000 during the summer, when tourists flock to this picture postcard New England town. Stacey was a nurse at the local elementary school, and just about everyone knew her.
Any kid in town, if they would see her, "Oh, Mrs. Burns, Mrs. Burns."
She walked into a room, she lit it up.
Ed Burns first met Stacey 20 years ago when she was a student and he was a young merchant marine. Stacey's big brother Michael remembers when she brought Ed home to meet the family.
Ed was an interesting fellow, a little eccentric. You know, he showed up in a pea coat and a big scally cap, and he's just different.
They had a whirlwind courtship, and Ed was smitten by the vivacious Stacey. In 1992, they were married in a traditional Catholic mass. Their family grew quickly. By their 10th anniversary, Stacey and Ed had 5 children, a boy and 4 girls.
Mommy's gonna be having another one. Not anytime soon.
As a merchant marine, Ed spent months out at sea, while Stacey stayed home to care for their growing family. But things grew more complicated when Ed returned to dry land.
I think there was a little bit of a natural tension when Ed would come back from being out to sea for 6 months or so. There's a big adjustment, as you would imagine.
Was there tension when you would come home sometimes?
Initially, we both had to adjust because we were both commander of the ship, if you will.
She had her ship and you had yours.
I found out that even when I was home, I was actually second in command.
He didn't agree with everything my sister was doing, and he would let that be known.
Stacey's close friends recall the disagreements Stacey and Ed would have over issues like their children's diets.
The best thing was the cereals.
Oh gosh.
Daddy's coming home, we gotta hide the cereal.
Couldn't have any sugared cereals for the kids at all.
The majority of what she did while she was home, caring for those children herself, when he came home, it was always substandard.
Of course, you want good food for your kids, and you don't want to, you don't want them watching, nothing personal, a lot of television. But so we had our differences raising 5 kids.
Brittany Tufts was the Burns live-in babysitter. She says she witnessed firsthand the growing tension.
It wasn't an ideal marriage for her.
Was he controlling or demanding?
You know, he's always curious, wanted to check in on the kids, where they were, what they were doing, what she's doing in town when he wasn't around. And
So was Ed a jealous man?
he always wanted to know exactly what was going on. And if she would tell him the truth, he still wouldn't believe that it was the truth.
I didn't know what was going on here. Her life here had a side to it. I couldn't keep an eye on her and maybe some people that I didn't want her or the kids to be near.
Eventually, Ed's desire to control her became too much for Stacey to endure. She filed for divorce while Ed was out at sea.
I was in shock.
You're not going to be together anymore.
It wasn't a good feeling.
But suffice it to say that you didn't want the divorce.
No, I didn't.
Stacey and Ed's divorce was finalized just before Christmas in 2008. These family photos were licensed from Ed Burns. For the first time in almost 20 years, Stacey was single. She began dating a man she knew from her son's hockey games, Jim Vidum, a logger and divorced father of 2.
He's soft-spoken. He was helpful. He was caring and loving and good with the kids.
And protective.
Protective.
And then it became romantic.
Mm-hmm. A friend with benefits, she said.
Her friends say that after her divorce, Stacey was not interested in a serious relationship. But Jim had other ideas and may even have been obsessed with her.
Did you love Stacey?
I loved her. I loved her a lot. She was amazing. Probably 3 months into our friendship, I think we were in love, you know.
Starting over in a town the size of Wolfboro isn't easy. Stacey's new boyfriend, Jim, actually knew her ex-husband, Ed. And Jim recalls a conversation with Ed well before the divorce.
She's going to leave me. When she does, she's going to take everything. And then he looked at me and he pounded the steering wheel and he said, death before divorce. And when I talked to Stacey, she said, oh, he said that to everyone. You know, he always said death before divorce. That was his thing, you know.
Meaning?
Basically, he was saying, Stacey and I will never divorce, you know.
That somebody would be dead?
Yeah.
Before any divorce?
In the spring of 2009, Ed violated their divorce settlement in a dispute over money. Because of that, he and Stacey were due in court on the Monday after Mother's Day.
It was a contempt of court hearing related to the divorce.
Yeah. I'm sure she wasn't looking forward to it.
Yeah, because she was going to see Ed in court.
And it was always ugly, and it was always painful. And she thought she was over with the divorce. And unfortunately, he wasn't ready to stop fighting.
But the Friday before they were due in court, Stacey reluctantly met Ed to hand off their 3 young daughters for the weekend. The following night, Stacey's teenagers, Michael and Shannon, had a sleepover for some friends. Jim Vidum dropped by and asked for help removing a splinter from his hand. He then stayed to watch a movie. Jim left around 11, and Stacey and the kids went to sleep. On Mother's Day morning, Stacey and Jim plan to meet at a lacrosse tournament, but Stacey never shows up. So Jim drives to her house. He finds her driveway blocked by an ambulance, police cars flashing their lights, and crime scene tape everywhere.
When I got to the house, the kids were all sitting on the stairs, and Shannon looked up at me and she goes, Jim, Mom's dead. You know, my first thought was, maybe she had an accident, maybe she killed herself.
Early that morning, when Stacey hadn't come down to breakfast, the kids assumed she had overslept. But then Stacey's 15-year-old son Michael went up to her bedroom and made a gruesome discovery. His mother covered in blood.
When Michael said she had cuts on her legs and that her face was all cut open, I knew that she was murdered.
Wolfboro police responded to a house on Main Street late this morning and found the body of a woman. They are not releasing her name, and they are not...
Stacey Burns had been viciously attacked and stabbed dozens of times.
And her children saw her. Whoever that creep is knew that those kids were sleeping in that house and they were going to find her.
On Mother's Day.
On Mother's Day.
As news spread of Burns' death, those who knew her laid flowers and gifts across the street from her house.
Stacey's murder sends shockwaves through the quiet village of Wolfboro, New Hampshire.
There's been a lot of rumor and speculation. This is a very small town, and it gets much smaller when something like this happens.
Police believe that sometime in the early morning hours of Mother's Day, an intruder entered the Burns' unlocked house while Stacey and the children were asleep. Former FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
If this was such a violent crime, what does that tell you about the perpetrator?
When you have that many wounds, particularly in the face and the throat and the head, it's really overkill. This is somebody that's full of rage and anger, and it isn't a general rage or anger, it's personal. It's personal between the killer and the victim.
somebody was very, very angry. I think we've all had heartbreak in our lives, and you know, that's not the way to respond to heartbreak.
Whose heart did Stacey Burns break?
She was a creep magnet.
Did this small-town school nurse have a secret life that was about to be exposed?